about the topic what drives Indian MNCs overseas investment decisions, and we look from the developing economy perspective. Yeah, so just giving you a little background, outward foreign direct investment has been a significant focus of multinational enterprises from emerging markets. The recent surge in Indian and Chinese OFDI has intrigued researchers in international business, which in the past was dominated by developed economies. Now, for instance, there has been an extensive jump in OFDI by Indian MNEs from 678 million in 2001 to 12.26 billion in 2018. And this is owing to the continuing relaxations that the government has provided in terms of capital account convertibility since 2004 and the overseas investments. That is, they have allowed 400% of the company's net worth under the automatic route since 2007. Like this, the Indian OFDI cumulative aggregate growth rate over the previous 2 decades ranks second, that is 18%, only to China, that's number one with 30%. Well, this relationship between governance quality and OFDI has recently received much attention from the researchers and policymakers. Now, governance quality, as we know, we pick up these variables, the World Governance Index by the World Bank. So there are 6 indexes that we talk about. Now, several researchers have examined the OFDI determinants linked to host and home countries, institutional characteristics, and the factors such as high governance quality, low labor cost, ease of doing business, and macro stability related various aspects. However, most existing studies have focused on China's OFDI because that's number one anyways. And the only difference is that China's OFDI is largely driven by the state-created advantages, such as preferential access to capital, expedited approvals, technological support, tax advantages, and social networks in foreign market. So such preferential treatment that enables Chinese OFDI to mitigate the disadvantages of the home country embeddedness and the governance distances between the home and the host country is not so with India. It further aids Chinese government further aids funding probably least valuable. It actually makes least valuable technological and brand seeking forays very easy, to actually go and go ahead with the joint ventures or acquisitions or make their presence felt in the foreign market. Reason being that though there are large number of studies that talks about Chinese OFDI, the findings doesn't apply to each and other Asian developing countries because every country doesn't have these kind of supporting supporting help provided by the government. And in India particularly, it's not the government that gives the push other than the policies that they definitely now have been laying emphasis on. It's the corporate or the private sector that's all involved in overseas investment. So they do it on their own expertise. The present study today aims to promote OFDI through relaxations in overseas investment norms, significantly strengthened by the Modi government since 2014 through policy interventions and institutional transformations. Now, while conceptual studies exist exploring the effect of Indian OFDI on internationalization and global economic integration, empirical knowledge on how host institutional distances affect OFDI motives is largely limited. Now, India's evolving formal institutional architecture with the ambition to connect Indian firms with global markets under the Modi regime presents a unique setting for re-examining Indian MNE's OFDI motivations and their influence on the influence of governance quality on OFDI. Now, the institutional and governance voids distinctively characterizes institutional quality in the developing economy on various governance fronts. This compels the emerging MNEs to indulge in either the institutional arbitrage or through institutional escapism or institutional exploitation to manage this isomorphic burden of the home host governance distances. Now, studies report mixed evidences of OFDI and governance quality relationship. Few of them demonstrates that EMNE's response positively to home country institutional governance weaknesses, while others say that the firm's MNEs prefer robust governance qualities to avoid home governance constraints. Now, this disparities also gives us a chance to go and test what's true for the Indian MNCs. Well, a study explicitly investigates if the governance quality of host economy affects the locational presence of Indian OFDI in either of the regions. Now, we have tested it for developed regions and developing regions separately, because there's a huge difference between the governance quality or so-called the institutional environment in both these regions. Now, the study employed augmented gravity specification and panel data settings. And our primary focus is actually also on the additional determinants. So we have incorporated OFDI's motivations even further, other than the institutional quality. So there we have backed our theoretical backing through Dunning's OLI framework. So the study examines the regional motives of Indian MNCs using Dunning's eclectic paradigm with extended locational factors and certainly the North's institutional theory, wherein we're gonna check for the governance quality. The study comprises of OFDI data from 15 developed and 25 developing economies across 2008 to 2018, and the study employs the Tobit model with the left censoring limit of 0 to evaluate the gravity model framework. The hypothesis, we expect that the domestic experience of the Indian firms operating in continuously improving governance climate should be reflected in their investment in better governed nations, be it developed or developing. One second. Okay, now the findings that we got is states that strategic assets and market seeking motivations are the prime motivations that actually influence Indian MNE's investment decisions overseas. But when they are seeking strategic and marketing investments in developed countries, we prefer relatively weaker governance quality. Now, but okay, Indian MNCs prefer when they are preferring investments in the developing countries, we prefer strong governance quality, exception to voice and accountability. So largely what we understand is that when MNCs move to the developed country, because we already have this of foreign embeddedness in us, it's so difficult to go and standalone operate there. And certainly we haven't developed ourselves in terms of governance to reach that level, that we prefer somewhat similar kind of the background. Or if we look at quantitatively, we say we prefer largely the weaker ones. But when we move to the developing countries, because within that with our developing counterparts, India is placed far better. And because we are better than the rest, we always try to move to the countries that give us better governance framework, or the countries that provide us better institutional qualities. Now, findings suggest that Indian investors are more cautious when investing in developing economies with weak governance setup vis-a-vis developed economies that otherwise have a more robust regulatory quality. Now, Indian OFDI is thus attracted, we can thus say that it is actually attracted to better governed nations. Because even if we say weakly governed developed countries, compared to us, they are more developed, they are more highly better governed compared to the home country circumstances. In other words, with consistently improving home governance quality, Indian MNCs prefer investment in developing countries with a comparative or robust governance framework. And certainly this is what we were actually anticipating even before we did got these findings, But the relationship between GQ, that is governance quality, and OFDI further suggests that governance attributes should be the prime focus of government across developing regions if they want to attract overseas investment, because even the developing ones prefer better governance quality. Now, economic growth necessitates strong governance and overarching institutional building. Developing nations should focus on improving governance quality in terms of citizen participation, as well as weaker VA preferred by investors may be detrimental to nations' long-term growth. Now, this is also very interesting, In developing countries, Indian MNCs prefer to invest when they have wherever they find weaker voice and accountability. Now, weaker voice and accountability actually relate to less public saying in the policy making. Now, this frankly holds very true when we are seeking resource seeking investment. So that because when we are seeking resource, let's say even in the coal sector, they should not, and it all relates to sustainability and the issues related to pollution and all. If the public will have too much of saying, then it's difficult to run the business, as we have seen in Australia, the problem that was faced by Adani. So we see that the results makes a lot of sense. And going forward, based on this particular set of results, I'm going to look into the sectoral aspect, that how much these factors are impacting when we what we say are strategic asset seeking in nature, or we are resource seeking in nature, or we are market seeking in nature. So going forward, I'll do a sectoral study to investigate each of these impacts on the investment front. And concurrently, Indian policymakers should further strengthen the governance quality to promote more MNCs operations in developed nations and strengthen their foothold. And that seems to be a very relevant recommendation, because government has come up with a lot of RTAs in negotiation, or they have already commenced with the developed country. So there has to be a triangulation between the FDI policy, industry policy, and the RTA policy. And all of them joins through institutional quality or the governance. So the better we are, the better for us to interact with the developed ones that has better governance quality. Thank you. That's all from my side.